Okay, everybody, let's do some reviews this week. Again, not paid sponsorships or anything. So first thing we're going to review here is a cat litter. Now, I used Fresh Step for a while, and it has a scent to it. It's kind of nice, but cats are very scent sensitive. And while they use the litter, I thought, well, let me get something unscented for them. So I found one. Paws and Claws Fresh and Free Unscented Clumping Cat Litter. Okay, seemed reasonable. 35-pound pails. All right, so I got 5 cats. I need big pails. So I got it. And it's one of those that isn't no dust. And the thing is, it isn't even low dust. So what I found out from using it, it started out okay the first time I used it. It's heavier than the other ones were for the same size. So, in other words, I have a litter genie. When I fill the litter genie up and take it out, it's much heavier with this litter than it was with the other. Okay, that's fine. But it talks about being low dust and low tracking. Well, if you consider something that would require a hood over the top with a filtered fan system sucking the air out, or changing the litter box outside, I guess you consider this low dust. I change a litter pan, and the light hits the dust coming out of this thing, and it's just massive. It leaves dust on everything. Low tracking means that your cat's paws are seen tracking through the dust. It is not a good product if you're looking for low dust. As far as doing the job of being cat litter, it did a great job there. It collected the material, wrapped around it. It was easy to clean up anything the cats put in the pan, so it was great for that. It's just way too high a dust. In addition to that, I've noticed that the cats sneeze more and I sneeze more now that I've been using that stuff. So not a big recommend on that. Again, if you're in a situation where, I don't know, there's air going through all the time, or you're changing the pan outside, it's probably fine. It's inexpensive, but to me, it's not worth the change in price just for that. So I'll have to find something else that's unscented and give that a shot. For my next thing, I want to talk about the failure of AI. Now, this is not... It's the AI's inability to think, let's say, outside the box. So I've got a process where I'm making a checkers set. In order to do that, I start with an image that I convert into a sketch using Inkscape. And then I need to pull that into, I've been pulling it into Blender just so I can see what it looks like, manipulate it, make sure that the mesh looks okay, make sure there's no non-manifold pieces to it before I create an STL out of Blender, and then I import it. So Inkscape's giving me an SVG that I import into Blender. And the issue I was having was the item I was getting out of Blender was not thick enough in the lines. So again, starting off with an image, to Inkscape, to Blender, to Tinkercad, where I'm putting it on the base and doing the work of building out the piece itself. And then from there, it's got to go into Creality to be printed. So image looks good. Comes out of Inkscape looking exactly like it should. Comes out of Blender looking exactly like it should, once I got it cleaned up a bit. Goes into Tinkercad, okay, comes out okay. Goes into Creality, looks okay until you go to render it. As soon as the slicer starts up, some of the walls are too thin. All right, it was a sketch, that makes sense. So I need to adjust it so that it's bigger. And that led me down a whole thing in Blender. And the ChatGPT was more than happy to tell me how I can fix it in Blender. It didn't really work for a lot of things that it tried to do. Some of the stuff was okay. Some of it not so great as to what it was trying to do to make this thing thicker. So I posed to it, why don't we do it a step before? The response I got, well, that's the perfect place to do it. Well, seeing as I'd already laid out the entire workflow that I was trying to do with this thing, it never once said, well, the object that's coming into Blender could be thicker, and then that would make this thing work better. So Inkscape allows you to set stroke or to expand the item. In this case, what I'm bringing in doesn't have a stroke to it. It's got a pathway to all the lines that are in there. It's a black and white sketch that's coming in. So it's not having a problem getting that part, but it's having a problem expanding it, making it thick enough that I can use it. Once I got that straightened out in Inkscape, then the rest of the process works great. But again, spent a lot of time in Blender with the AI giving me all kinds of different ideas on what I could do in Blender to make it work. But that was the absolute wrong place to do it. If I came in with thicker lines, then Blender would render it as thicker, which would then go down the stream as thicker, and then go to Creality Slicer, and it slices it just fine. But not once did the AI go back and think of that particular part, because I said, well, can we do it in Blender? Yes, we can do it in Blender. No, we can't do it in Blender, not cleanly. There's a thickness that you can do when you do solidify in Blender, for those who are interested in the technicals of it. And that thickness that you set in there does not work quite the way you'd want it to. Now, I did a wolf outline, worked great. Went through the whole process without a problem. When I got to the bear, it didn't work as well. And there were different styles of the two that I was doing here. But the thickness in both cases ended up with spikes because it got confused about what it was working with. Even though it had already brought in the curve, even though Blender had converted it to a mesh before I went to solidify, right? So I brought it into Blender as curves. Expanded it so that it was the thickness that I wanted it to be, because it was on the Z-axis that it was doing this. Then converted that to mesh. When I go to convert that to a solidify, that's when the issues came up. You got bad images and everything else. So it just did not work once we got to that step. But again, bringing it in a step before it took care of the workflow. So it's one of those things that AI is helpful in that it told me where the things that commands were, or the menu items were, that I needed to manipulate, kind of, in Inkscape. Get to that in a minute. And got me where I needed to be, or at least got me on the path of where I needed to be. So when I got into Inkscape and it was saying how to do the path and get the image out of the way, okay, that's all great. But then it had, because I kept forgetting to take the image out. When you do things in Inkscape, there's two copies. There's the original that you came in with, and then there's the copy that's made that you want to use, and you got to get rid of the original. But once I got that done, the pathway had no stroke. And it was giving me these instructions that you needed to do stroke. I'm like, but it's not there. And if I set the stroke setting to what I wanted for 2 mils, it wasn't working. Well, it wasn't working because what I was bringing in doesn't have a stroke to it, obviously, or would have told me it did. And when I kicked that back to the AI, it's like, yes, that makes sense that yours doesn't have a stroke. But it just followed a path down through whatever the easiest path was, or the place it was going down the documentation in, and came up with it. The other thing I've noticed is, again, sometimes the documentation isn't 100%, that it's reading from, or the documentation is old because these models were not built yesterday. They were built a while back on older stuff. And if it can't go look at the current documentation, because there's a limitation on that in some of these AIs, then it can't tell you what the correct stuff is for the version you're using right now, only for the last one that it knew. So AI, again, as I had said before, using it as a tool to assist is fine. Doing it for certain graphical things, like it does a pretty good job of turning things into three-dimensional objects from a two-dimensional object, but that doesn't get you everywhere that you need to go. For my last review of this week, I want to talk about solar panel mounting. Now, you've probably seen from my other pods, when I mounted my solar panels, I did not mount them on my roof. My roof has a very low pitch, 14 on one and 16 degrees on the other. But I do have a roof that faces south. But here's the problem with mounting on a roof. And the reason I mounted them vertically. When you mount on a roof, you're stuck with the pitch that the roof is at. Now, for solar panels to be most efficient, the sun needs to be hitting that panel square on the middle. That's why you'll see units out there that actually move the panels to track the sun, is to keep that sun square on there. And there's two axes that they'll work on there. One is they will turn the panel from, we'll say, left to right. And the other is they will adjust the pitch of the panel based off of where the sun position is. When you mount them on the roof, you lose that ability, right? You're stuck with whatever's there. Like I said, I've got a roof that's got, the big one here is a 16-degree pitch. So it's 16 degrees down. So 16 degrees of angle off of what would be 0 being horizontal. Now, when I think about my panels, I think of 0 as being vertical and 90 as being horizontal. So with 16 being down, it really is at a 84-degree angle, right? But that's not where the sun is, and that's not where the sun's going to be come winter. Come winter, it's going to be down in the 20s. So there's no way to get quite there when you're mounting on a roof. That's problem number one. Now you might think, well, that's simple. We just cantilever it, put a hinge on it, right, and put it on the roof. Now think about that come winter. Snow is going to build up behind those panels because the panels are now pitched upward, right? To catch that lower volume, you're going to have to move them up from the top of them and angle them down. That's problem number one. Problem number two is wind. If your panels aren't mounted to a roof, flat, in this case, they're hinged at one side. That means that if the wind hits it, all the force of that wind is going to hit along that hinged area, whatever that hinging system is. But it's all going to be on that hinge. When they're mounted vertically on an outside structure, right, that allows you to pitch them, and you don't have to worry about the wind hitting the back of the panels. You don't have to worry about snow getting behind them. The other thing that you get by having it an external mount like I've got, I'm using 4x4s as my side pillars, is that the panels degrade from heat. In other words, they become less efficient. So efficiency number one, making sure that your panel is directly facing the sun at all times, or at most of the day if you can. Efficiency number two is the heat of the panel. If your panel is mounted to your roof, right, it's not going to have a lot of airflow underneath it. And you guys know how warm a roof can get. But when they're mounted vertically, what that allows you to get is airflow underneath, and that keeps the panels a little bit cooler. That's why you'll see solar fields right? All those solar panels in the field, which honestly could be adjustable. I haven't never seen an adjustable solar field. They all seem to be solidly mounted, and that's it, which seems to be lowering the efficiency of it. But they're all open underneath, right? So the air can get around them so it can keep the panels a little bit cooler. Now, let's review these solar fields that you see, right? There's a couple of things that they could do there a little better, in my opinion. The first is being able to make them adjustable, right? Now, any adjustment system is going to require some power. So you get a little bit of loss because you have to have power. If you've got one of those big sun trackers out there, it's going to be moving it. It's going to need power throughout the entire day. But when you're talking about just changing the pitch of the panels, you're only going to have to do that. You could do it once a month and still keep pretty good angle on there, or you could do it once a week. You're not talking about a lot of power, right? You're just talking about moving a panel a certain distance and then leaving it there for a month. But the other thing that they could do, and this is something that isn't used too much, and that's bifacial panels. Now, in certain circumstances, they're very hard to use. So if you think about a solar farm, you see all those panels out in the field, and they're at such an angle that it's just shade underneath them. Well, then you're not going to get much out of a bifacial panel. But if you can set the panels up so that it's got more light getting underneath it, then you put a white material or a reflective material of some kind underneath so that the light can bounce up against the panels. Now you're getting sun from the one side and the reflected sun from the other side, and you're getting more power. Now, I did see a proposition. I don't know what the final came out to be on that, but the panels were not mounted facing the sun. They were mounted east to west. Kind of an interesting thought here, in that the sun is, you'll lose power when the sun is at noon. Okay, so your row of panels is facing dead south. It's going to have power coming in on the east. It's going to have power coming in on the west. They're bifacially pointed panels. And I believe the test that they were going to do was a panel with the front facing east and underneath it the front facing west. Now, I don't know if they were going to alternate that back and forth so that the top one for this one is east and the top one for the next one is west, and keep going back and forth as they went down the set. I don't know. And as far as I know, they were being mounted in landscape, so they weren't doing portraits next to each other. So a east-west type of portrait line. But the thought was that you'll get power on both of those panels on the east and on the west. So you've got a trade-off, right? When the light's coming in on the east, the facing part of the panel will get the most power, and the back piece, they get less power coming in through the back, but it's still a bifacial panel. Now, if you move over to the west, you've now reversed it. And that's where I think maybe they would have flipped the panels up every other one so that the west ones were on the top and then the bottom, and the top and then bottom, just to alternate it to balance that out a little bit more. But mounted that way, they'll get sun from the west. Now, in theory, you could do that on a roof, but you'd be doing it at the pitch. And doing things on the pitch, again, you're going to have the wind hitting it. So it doesn't seem like a great method to do there. These were field-mounted ones, mounted basically 4x4s in the ground with these panels in between them. So that is another possibility to do that, but not sure how that final testing came out. And it's not something I can test, so it's not something I can review. But I can tell you when it comes to the panels the way I've got them mounted, I've got wind flow all the way around, and I can change the pitch of the panel. Again, every month, I can go out and change the pitch of the panel so that the panel is dead on to the sun, which will give me more efficiency than not. But that's what I got for you guys this week. I will talk to you all next week.